Let's talk about solipsism, or maybe I'll just be talking to myself, who knows. Today, we've got a channel that shall go completely blameless because I'm just piggybacking off of his ideas, and he's really doing nothing at all wrong, or at least not that I can see. But I think it's an important subject to take a look at, so let's dive right in. I actually stumbled across this video, which is an English as a second language type channel, but the host is talking about solipsism, at least tangentially, and I thought it would be a great springboard for having a discussion about actual solipsism and why solipsists are such idiots. Because if you've ever tried to talk to one, you'll know that's absolutely true. Sorry, I don't think you're real. Everything is an illusion, and the only thing that exists is my brain. Okay, why are you talking to me again if you don't think I'm real? Why are you on an imaginary computer, hooked up to an imaginary internet, connected to an imaginary social media server, talking to imaginary people? Please explain. Oh yeah, they can't. So, let's see where the insanity truly lies.
How can we prove that everything is not an illusion?
We can't. In fact, we really can't know anything to any appreciable degree of absolute certainty. Welcome to the real world. Now, I've said this before, but I thought it was important to really give it a good accounting, because every once in a while, I get hit with some solipsist sympathizer, and I think it's important to understand what's actually going on. Even if we can't prove that absolutely everything around us isn't an illusion, that's not a license to just assume that it is, because it provides some form of emotional comfort for you. It's the same thing that goes for religion. Just because you're not getting the answer you like, that doesn't give you a license to make shit up. This is absolutely never the way to go, whether you're talking about religion or anything else. So keep that in mind as we move forward.
I'm Julian Northbrook from doingenglish.com, and this is a question that I've been thinking about a fair bit recently. How can we prove that everything is not an illusion? And we can't. It's as simple as that. This is related to something that philosophers call the problem of other minds, or what is also often called the solipsism problem.
Well, it's the problem of hard solipsism, to which there cannot be a solution. Not is not, cannot be. We have to rely on the validity of our senses and our minds, and if those things are called into question, we have absolutely nothing else to fall back on. Ultimately, the very basis of human thought and reason is an assumption that we have to make to even begin to work through our views on reality. We have to assume that reality exists in the first place. Yet, whether anyone likes it or not, we all have to do it, even solipsists, and we'll get to that in a minute.
We believe ourselves to be conscious. But how can we know that everything, including material things, or even a single proton, isn't also conscious? Or conversely, that we're not actually the only consciousness in all of the universe?
You can't even know that you are conscious. A lot of people will go back and point to Descartes' "I think, therefore I am." But that doesn't even hold up anymore. How do you know that you're thinking? How do you know that you're not an insanely complicated artificial intelligence computer that's just been programmed to think that you're thinking, but you're actually just following a very complex algorithm? How do you know that you're not a character in someone else's very detailed dream? And the answer is, you can't. You just can't. So no matter what Descartes said, you have no idea if you're real in any fundamental way. And that's kind of a problem, isn't it? Because if you're not real, or at least you can't demonstrate that you are, how do you rationally make any determinations about anyone else or anything else? You can't even show that rationally makes sense outside of yourself because you can't show that there is anything outside of yourself, or even that you're a real independent mind to start with. Once you acknowledge that, where do you go and how do you go there?
Evolution has given us the ability to intuit the feelings and emotions of other people. But we can never actually get inside of other people's heads, and therefore we can never actually experience the world as they do through their eyes. We can only guess, but what if that guess is all an illusion inside of our own heads? What if we simply imagine the whole thing? What if I am the universe, experiencing myself in the false belief that I'm not the only one and that when I die, the universe simply ceases to exist?
What if you're just an illusion and you are just a figment of the imagination of someone unknown to you? What if there's just some cosmic computer out there that cooks up illusionary universes all day and all night, and no thinking mind anywhere actually exists? It's a deep rabbit hole to go down, and once you leap over the edge, it's a long, long way down with no conceivable bottom. If you are ever unfortunate enough to talk to a solipsist, this is really where they think they're at. They're actually not, as I'll get to coming up, but this is the nonsense that they are pushing because they've been noodling their navels for so long that they've just come out of their assholes. This is the same kind of thing that happens to the religious, if you notice, when they grab onto a nonsensical concept and then they try to wrap absolutely everything else around it, whether any of that makes sense or not. And it never does, if you notice. And that's why it's so hard to unravel these people's bizarre ideas, because they're not using logic or reason.
I can't know. And that's the problem. And it sounds absolutely batshit crazy, but you can't actually disprove it, and we'll never be able to disprove it. Not at least until we develop what neuroscientist Christoph Koch calls a consciousness meter, a mechanism of sorts that will be able to measure consciousness like a thermometer measures temperature.
But not even then, because how do you know that there is anyone out there to measure? For all you can actually tell, objectively anyhow, all of the meters in the world that you can construct, they're all in your head. If your head is real to begin with at all, and you may be subconsciously feeding back whatever data to yourself that you want to see, without being able to prove any of it actually means anything, what do you do then? Because for all you can tell, absolutely everyone you see around you, they could all just be figments of your imagination. And that's why the problem of hard solipsism is so insidious. Because the only tool you really have in your arsenal is your own brain, and you can't necessarily trust anything that your senses tell you. Nor can you be absolutely certain that your brain exists in the first place. You are trapped in there, and the second you doubt your inputs, all is lost.
Again, this all sounds pretty crazy, and when you start to think about this stuff, it makes your head spin, it makes the mind boggle. But you can also think of it on a practical level related to the speaking of English as a second language in the real world. Say you go to a job interview and you don't get the job and you believe it to be because your English was no good. Or say you say something and somebody else doesn't understand you and you believe that it's because your pronunciation is bad or because your English was bad. Or you encounter some asshole, and we've all encountered them speaking a second language, that laughs at you or takes the piss out of you and puts you down because of your English. Perhaps you made a mistake. We make assumptions about these situations. I didn't get the job because my English is terrible. This person laughed at me because my English is bad, and blah, 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 blah. But these things are all just an illusion inside of our own head, something that we have constructed by way of interpretation for what we've experienced.
Now, he goes off into something else, which is fine for his channel, and I wanted to say thank you because I'm just kind of running away based on what he's saying. But I actually want to stick with actual solipsism for the moment, so I'm just going to kind of let him go. Because in all of those cases, if you're not convinced that any of that actually happened in the first place, what do you do then? There is no job because there's no other person, because you're the only thing that exists, if you do at all. Therefore, nothing else matters, and it's all just a fantasy land in your mind that you've generated for yourself to live in. Nobody laughs at you, because there's nobody else out there. Nobody insults you because nobody else is real. You're just stuck in this spiral of, I'm real and nothing else is. And that's ultimately self-destructive from everything that we can see, if we're real at all. But anyway, try telling that to a seemingly convinced solipsist. Go ahead, see where that gets you. It's not really that much fun.
But we don't actually know what is really going on because we cannot get into the heads of those other people. We cannot experience the world through their eyes. Perhaps you didn't get the job not because of your English, but because the interviewer was a racist arsehole. Perhaps the person laughed at you because they have some kind of deep emotional problem themselves that they are struggling to deal with, and a serious lack of self-esteem, and the only way that they can manage that is to put other people down. We simply don't know those things. We don't know what goes behind the things that happens to us and the things that people say and do.
Assuming those people are real to begin with, which obviously you can't know in any objective way. But this also goes to how the religious operate, if you notice. They start with an emotionally comforting conclusion that has no demonstrable basis in objective reality. Then they form layer upon layer upon layer of bald rationalization to justify that irrational conclusion, because that's what they really wish was true. Reality actually supports them, at least in their own heads, and everyone who tells them that they're wrong, well, we're all just pawns of the devil, and it's all just some crazy conspiracy to discredit their obviously true beliefs because they have to be right? They'll feel really, really bad if they're wrong, and that's what this is really about. Because their entire self-concept is based around this indefensible idea at the core of their onion of irrationality. It's why having discussions with these people is such a problem. Because you'll get to a place where they're just going to shut down completely because they simply can't risk getting anywhere close to the truth. And this is true of all irrational people. And it's why irrationality is such a danger to everyone.
Therefore, to my mind, there's no point in paying too much attention to that illusion that we create that tells us that we are crap, we are no good, we deserve not to get the job, or we deserve to be laughed at. Anyway, food for thought, something to think about. I think that's enough existential crisis for me for one day. Enough philosophy for one day, to be sure.
Now, I know he's not pushing a solipsistic viewpoint, and again, I want to thank him for putting out this video because it made a pretty decent springboard for me to get my ideas out there. And I think he did do a decent enough job of describing the basics, at least as far as his example goes. So, once again, thank you. However, you have to keep in mind that there really are people out there who actually believe this crap, or at least they pretend to. Because in reality, I don't think they actually buy into any of it. This becomes painfully clear once you talk to a professing solipsist. And unfortunately, I've done that quite a bit over the years, because they do not behave as you would expect anyone who actually believed any of this bullshit to act. If you actually believed that you were the only mind in existence, that everything else was just an illusion generated by your brain, all of which is something you can't prove, of course, then why in the world would these people do the things that they do? Why would they act like anyone else was real? Why would you look both ways before crossing the street if all the cars and all the drivers and the street is just an illusion? It's not real. It's all in your brain. Why wouldn't you just take out an imaginary gun and go out into the imaginary street and shoot all of the imaginary people like it's a giant video game? Why not? What does that hurt? Well, the solipsist will make all kinds of excuses for why they act exactly as if there was an objective external reality, just as Christians make excuses for why they act as though there is no God, and the whole thing just gets sillier and sillier as time goes on. Because none of these people are being rational. They are all just trapped in an emotionally derived mental prison because their feelings mean a lot more to them than the facts do. And that's a problem whether anyone is willing to acknowledge it or not. Now, I'm going to do at least one more solipsistic video coming up where I'm going to go into why they act the way that they act, and we're going to work through the problem of hard solipsism, so I hope that helps to some degree or another. It won't help the solipsists because they don't listen any more than the religious do. Just because you point out their inconsistencies and shortcomings, they just don't care. All of the places where they're demonstrably wrong, that doesn't make them change their minds because these are not bright people. They're just not. They're sad, pathetic losers trying desperately to figure out why the world isn't the way they wish it was. These are people, if you really stop and think about it, who are trying to make themselves important. And anyone who has had a run-in with any of these lunatics will know this is the case. But they don't care because this isn't about facts, just like the religious. This is about feelings. And feelings, whether they like it or not, they really don't get you anywhere useful on their own. So, until next time, take care and try to keep a grasp on reality. You're a million times better than these idiots are.